I'd had this financial situation where I'd lent someone money. I'd lent them $40,000 and that money never came back to me. And so I was faced with either getting a job or figuring out how to continue working on my startup, this fitness startup, Heartbeat. And so I moved into my car in January of 2011, and then Burning Man happened in August. So there was kind of like a whole process leading up to that. And I'll take a brief detour here as well, because it's also related to the sexual transformation that I had.
Welcome to The Deep Coach, the podcast where we explore the transformational journeys that shape us and that propel us to change the world. I'm your host, Jonathan Edmida, and in each episode, we sit down with those who have journeyed into the depths of spiritual transformation and who are now reshaping the world through their presence and their work. In listening to these incredible human beings, you'll find insight, inspiration, and practical tools to support your journey as a coach and as a human being. My guest today is Lorenz Sell. Lorenz is the co-founder of Sutra, a social learning platform designed around group experiences that emphasizes meaningful connections and conversations online. Lorenz has spent 2 decades building technology companies and has a deep interest in how technology can be used to cultivate mutual support and shared understanding. I probably share this each time, and I do mean it each time, but man, you're in for a good one today. Lorenz is the real deal. In this conversation, he is a wide open book. He's deep, vulnerable, insightful. He talks about what it was like living out of a car for 11 months as he was building a startup, the sexual transformation he underwent. He shares a transformational mystical experience he had at Burning Man. And if you don't know what Burning Man is, we get into that as well. I mean, there's just so much here. We also talk about what is needed to build a successful business, what is needed to have a successful business partnership, what is needed to have a successful life partnership. This is a wide-ranging, deep conversation. Enjoy. You mentioned to me that you had a life-changing mystical experience, which sounds very juicy. But before we get into all that, and we will get into that, who would you say Lorenz Sell was prior to that experience?
Mm, mm. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the question. It honestly is not something I've had a lot of time to reflect on, and it's an interesting reflection because I would say the person before that experience um, was a good person, but maybe wasn't as aware of his wholeness, wasn't as connected to it, and also wasn't as connected to um, um, meaningfully connected to a higher spiritual understanding or calling. Because when I look back on myself as like that experience happened when I was 30, I mean, for sure there were all sorts of maybe superficially visible things. Like you could say that I spent most of my late teens and 20s like chasing women and kind of being very sexually driven. Um, but what's present for me in looking back at that um, is that there was always like a good-heartedness about me. Like there was never a cruelty or like an abusiveness or like a kind of a quality about me that would like take advantage of people. Certainly I was like prone to getting in trouble and doing really stupid shit. But I think one of the things that I really appreciate about like looking back at that side of me is that I really recognize a certain wholeness there, um, even though I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't really in relationship to it the way I am now, and an understanding of integrity wasn't present for me. So I probably lied much more, and certainly like and I'm happy to be very transparent about this because I think one of the biggest areas where it showed up for me was in my relationship to women, and I was literally unfaithful to every woman that I dated, and I was very kind of promiscuous, and that was a big part of what drove me and got me in trouble as a priority. And so the concept of integrity in say in every relationship that I have wasn't present for me, even though and you can have probably like a philosophical discussion about like how can I claim goodness and be cheating on women and things like that. Um, I think that there's you can do questionable things, but while still, um, how do I put this? It's an interesting thing to talk about. Um, you can do stupid things without being cruel, and while still having, like, being kind of like connected to a certain base level of humanity. And I think even in examining my past and seeing like all sorts of really stupid things that I was doing, there was a certain humanity there, and it was maybe that the seeds of that were what really became more available to sprout into something much deeper, after my spiritual experience.
Hmm. If anybody listened to the episode, my own episode where Leon interviewed me, it's almost a mirror, my
Hmm.
own upbringing. And I have the same sense. It's interesting because I put out a post years and years ago now, kind of being transparent about who I was as a teenager and kind of apologizing to anybody that I treated poorly.
Hmm.
And one young woman came to me and she's like, even though, yeah, I know you had this reputation and all these things, but honestly, you always treated me with respect and you were always a good person. And
Hmm.
it was good to hear because I think I was judging myself harshly for the way I was as a teenager, and I think young men make dumb mistakes and we don't have a developed prefrontal cortex. And so I do fully understand where you're coming from when you say you were a good person and you did, knuckleheaded things along the way.
Yeah, and to that point, a big part of some of the work I've done since then has actually been, having conversations with all those people, certainly everyone that I could actually reach, to really take responsibility, to apologize, to clean up, those relationships, which, yeah, has also been a big part of the kind of like transformation and healing.
Yeah, what a beautiful journey. You're one of the rare people that I've come across that can claim Earth as your home. And what I mean by that is you literally have not lived in any one particular place your entire life. Can you share a little bit about that here?
Mm. Yeah, and it's an interesting confluence into maybe the spiritual experience, the mystical experience that I had. But, yeah, I grew up all over the place. My biological father was a German diplomat, and he died when I was 5. And so I was born in Germany. We moved to Australia when I was 3, and then my stepfather was a Swiss diplomat, and then we moved around. So I ended up living in Germany, Australia, Morocco, South Korea, Canada, Switzerland, and then college in the U.S. in Boston. And then I moved from Boston to Hawaii to San Francisco to New York, and now in Berlin. And I haven't lived anywhere much more than through basically everywhere 3 to 5 years. Um, and to put people always ask you where you're from, and uh, my mother's Russian, so I speak Russian, and I never lived in Russia. My father's German, and I don't speak German. I have a German passport. Um, and now I live in Germany since I moved here a few years ago. But, um, so this question of identity has always been a big thing, right? Because, um, I'm kind of Russian, but I'm not. I speak Russian, but I don't really know that much about the culture, and I don't feel German at all. And I've spent most of my life in American schools. Certainly, when I was traveling, I went to American schools in all those countries, and then I spent 20 years living in the U.S. And I'm not American, so so somewhere, in my early 30s, I kind of figured out that, like, when people ask you where you're from, that to me that question points at where do you feel some kind of deeper affinity or affiliation with, and I realized that, um, that was Earth. That if I had some sense of patriotism, it would be about being from Earth.
Yeah. And yet there is one place on earth that feels more like home than others.
This too, and it's funny. You did great research, so I'm not sure what you're pointing at there, but there's two places. So one is certainly Burning Man, and one of the things I really got this last burn. So in 2025, Natasha and I went a few months ago, and I really got that one of the reasons why it has such a big place in my heart. This was my 14th burn, was because it's one of the few places where I just feel a sense of belonging. And really that question of like, where do you call home? It does land in for me very much in Burning Man. I can understand people who feel a sense of home through that experience for me. When someone's like, oh, like when I go home to Oklahoma, like that's home, um, or whatever. Um, that like the sense of I can't explain it, but just like I feel at home, I feel at peace, like I feel like deep belonging to this land, is present for me at Burning Man. And then maybe the counterpoint to that is a little place on the south shore of Kauai on the Hawaiian Islands called Kalalau, which is just like a really magical kind of very different energy place.
Mm. What do you think it is about Burning Man? Because you're not alone in that feeling
Hmm.
of this is home. This is where I belong. This is where I feel most myself. What do you think are the elements that have created that experience for so many?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely spent 14 years thinking about this.
Sure.
Um, I think Burning Man offers a near religious experience in a way because of um, what people discover about themselves and what people discover about what's possible in the domain of being human in the way that um, it's a space of radical self-expression. It's a space of non-judgment, and maybe most significantly, it's a space of um, generosity, like giving and gifting. I like. I feel like the word gifting. In some ways, it's perfect, and in some ways, it has certain associations with it that um, that almost uh, don't convey how profound it is, to be in you know, the sheer scale of it, right? To be in a space of 70,000 people where um, people are looking to contribute to your experience, and there is zero question of transactionality. If I'm walking down the street in Berlin or in New York City and someone is giving out grilled cheese sandwiches, there's always some question, right? Like, is this part of a promotional campaign? Are they promoting some sort of like new vegan cheese, or are they trying to sell me something? That they trying to like enroll me into their cult? uh
Yeah.
you know Whatever it is. And so I think in the default world, like, we have our guard up against people's generosities. When someone is like unusually generous, there's a little bit of like a signal in the back of your head being like, what's up? Can I trust this? Which is so fucking weird,
Yeah.
right? It's
Sure.
just so weird. Um, and so when you're in a space where you can experience generosity without question, without confusion, and you can be generous in that same way, and be fully received without any judgment, and you can allow all of yourself to show up, like your weird, freaky shadow sides that just you might not want to acknowledge, and you can just allow that to be, in a space, because it's such a freak show. In some ways, it's such a freak show. You have like everything happening that you're like, well, whatever my freakiness is can be okay here, because there's just so much freakier around me. But there's something really interesting about, like, it's easy to maybe dismiss that, or from a distance being like, oh, it's a bunch of people doing drugs in the desert. um but I think there's something there on a much deeper level. Even the substances in some ways help people get like things out of the way that allow you to really connect with like a deeper quality of humanity, to really be with people without judgment, without fear, without reservation, to be with yourself, to recognize your deepest like shadows or quirks or whatever, and embrace them. um and in the spirit of like of gifting presence and receiving that gift, and being in an environment where everybody is just creating magic, right? It's just like you're walking in, you're freezing your ass off in the middle of the night, it's a windy dust storm, and there in the middle of nowhere, there's like a guy on a grill making grilled cheese sandwiches and just handing them out. And you're like, what the fuck? And it's like the best grilled cheese sandwich you've ever had. And it's made with so much care and attention, right? He's got like the best high-end mayo and mustard and the fanciest cheese on the best bread. And he's taking 5 minutes for each one. And you're there waiting for 25 minutes just to get it. And you get it and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
And there's something about that is so deeply restorative in the sense of like at least for me, right? It just gave me this deep recognition about who I am, who I want to be, what's possible with other people, and how the kind of world that I want to live in, right? Not in the kind of world where we all get high and party all the time, but in the kind of world where we're able to be with that level of like wholeness and gifting and kind of just general reciprocity. It's not like I'll do this for you if you do this for me. It's just more that there's a whole ecosystem where we're all contributing to the magic of it, and somehow it works. And it's so hard to convey. Like I think on like you can describe this, but on an energetic level, to be in that space of just also, the kind of the journey of the 7 days in the way that you can literally feel the relational coherence of the space transforming as you approach the second half of the event. And so to experience that relational field, I think there's something there. That's what I meant by a religious experience. There's something there that you discover about, like, I guess, the direct experience of human spirituality, kind of like what its expression looks like, that is just deeply, deeply humbling and uplifting.
Yeah. Yeah. The one element that stands out to me in Burning Man is that there is absolute safety and security psychologically, physically, emotionally, financially. So people aren't coming from this place of lack, of insecurity. Of course, that's going to arise. People have their own experiences and depending on where they're at, but there is the freedom to just be
Have you
and
been?
not. I haven't,
But
but that's one
okay.
place. That's one place the people closest to me have.
Mm-hmm.
And it always stands out to me that is what the part of the ingredient that makes it makes the freedom of it accessible, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to think, where's my food going to come from necessarily. You don't have to think about, how do I look, how do I sound like, can I connect? It's all baked into there. And so then you're just free to experience and to drop your guard and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just when you said physical safety, it made me kind of laugh a little bit because there's like you could get hurt for sure, and that's part of the
Sure.
wildness of it. In that,
Sure.
and it's an interesting thing to explore. One of the things that um, was present for me this year, and I think it's so important to be connected to the shadow of a situation. Is that there's always a shadow, and for sure, one of the things about Burning Man is that I think like life in general, you attract particular kinds of experiences. And so I'll encounter people that have a very different experience of Burning Man than I do. Um, and so for sure there's challenging things that happen there. There's kind of like darker sides of maybe drug use or people getting hurt in different ways, or certainly like you can climb things and fall off them and stuff like that. So yeah, part of the environment also, one of the principles is radical self-reliance. And I think that invites a certain quality of presence, awareness, and responsibility that is also like this is what's nice about what I find is really well balanced in Burning Man, and maybe different from other events, that because sometimes I'll like I'm so gung ho about Burning Man and people are like, oh, I already go to this festival, I already go to this retreat, I already do this, I already get that. And for like I think anytime you go anywhere and you have a great experience is absolutely fantastic. But there is something really powerful about Burning Man in kind of like the way it balances polarities, in the way that there's also a roughness to it. There's a wildness to it. There's a wildness to it. There's a an undefinability about it that kind of brings all these things in, and it can beat you up. You know, so like there's no certainly by the time I leave Burning Man, I am physically a little
Awesome.
beat up about the experience. But there's something really deep about that, about how it really invites you to take full responsibility for everything.
Yeah, yeah. So take us to 2011 and that mystical experience you had at Burning
Mm,
Man.
mm. Um, I think like any kind of mystical experience, it can be difficult to convey. But I had just had like an argument with a friend, and I was by myself, and um, a stranger came up to me and said some things to me. You know, like what she said maybe was less significant than somehow maybe the reflection that it triggered inside me. And it's it's hard to explain the confluence of things that happened, but I had a visceral experience of world peace, and I felt a profound sense of awakening to my purpose in that. It just felt like all of a sudden I just discovered that my purpose was to be in service of world peace. I'd never thought about peace before. It wasn't something that was like on my mind. Um, I'd never thought about having a particular purpose or calling. Like at the time, I was really into. I still am really into fitness in one way or another. But at that time, in a different way, I was like a hardcore gym rat for 10 years, and I was working on a kind of a fitness platform, and I wanted to make the world like a healthier, fitter place. There's actually a hilarious video that I recorded. I was so that year, it was like the year of transformation. I spent 2011 living in my car in San Francisco to keep my startup working. So I'd had this kind of like financial situation where I'd lent someone money, and that I'd lent them $40,000, and it kind of that money never came back to me. And so I was faced with either getting a job or figuring out how to continue working on my startup, this fitness startup, Heartbeat. And so I moved into my car in January of 2011, and then Burning Man happened in August. So there was kind of like a whole process leading up to that. Um, and I'll take a brief detour here as well, because it's also related to the kind of the sexual transformation that I had, because as I mentioned, I'd had this relationship with women before that, and part of what helped me transform that was living in my car. It was actually the person I lent that money to was an ex-girlfriend that I had a very destructive relationship with. And so there was a certain confluence of things that were exploding in my life that kind of landed me in my car, which in some ways, if you think about it, is like the worst thing that can happen to you. Obviously my mom was like, "Where are you living now?" Like, "It's okay, mom, I'm living in my car."
Look, I normally don't jump in these things, but I'm curious,
Yeah.
what was your experience of it? Were you just like, my life is falling apart in that moment? What were you actually like, speaking? What was the inner dialogue?
It wasn't that my life was falling apart. I felt okay about it. It felt okay. Like there's something about it that, like, in some ways I was like, "Oh, this will make for a good story one day." But it didn't feel like this end of the world event. I think, um, and in some ways it was kind of in some ways it was kind of liberating, to not have to like pay rent and to deal with these things. But it was also very difficult. Like I think it was, um, there were just a lot of adjustments I had to make, that I wasn't comfortable sharing it with a lot of people. So I was kind of hiding that I was part of the San Francisco startup scene. So I was going to a lot of events where there was a lot of startup people, and I in general, very few people knew that I was living in my car. And then of course my dating life was non-existent. So that was a major transformation for me, and that I wasn't like, "Hey, you want to come back to my car?" I wanna, but um, that was the blessing, right? That was the blessing, because it really confronted me with my sexual energy in a way that if I had not lived in my car for those 11 months, I'm not sure that that would have transformed. Certainly in, like one thing that changed was my relationship to like masturbation. And like in my car, I stopped masturbating. And that somehow like it all came together to shift my relationship with my sexuality. So I was celibate for 18 months, and which was at that time a really long time for me. And then after that is when I met my wife, and now we've been together. She's my business partner. I mean, we've been together now for well, I guess it was 2012 to now, so that's what, 14 years. Um, so yeah, so that was the background context of this experience that I had at Burning Man, where I was working on a startup, 8 months into living in my car, very, very challenged, kind of like $60,000 in credit card debt. So kind of figuring out like where am I going? Where am I going with this? Like where am I going with life? In this kind of major social sexual transformation, social in terms of just like my relationship to people while living in my car, sexual in my relationship to women while living in my car. So there was a lot of things that were kind of um, maybe shifting in who I was, and coming up for like, I don't know, dissolution or transformation in some way. And so I had this experience about a visceral experience of world peace, whatever that means. Like I can't quite explain it. I just felt like this planet, like it's not about nuclear disarmament. It's not about like nonviolence. It was just peace. It was like a population of this planet at peace. And I can't define it more than that, but I felt it at an energetic level. And I felt that somehow it was my purpose to contribute to that. Um, and so I came out of that experience. It's so funny. This was the following morning. So I kind of had this like all night long experience of just like reflecting on this. And then that morning, as the sun was rising, I walked up to this guy I didn't really know too well. And he looks at me, and out of nowhere, he's like, if you want to change the world, you need to move to New York City. And so I'm like, okay. I was living in my car, and I literally, so I came out of that experience, and I went to my friends and I was like, I'm moving to New York City to work on world peace. And so everyone thought that I like, I went off the deep end on some like crazy mushroom journey or something.
Mm.
And so I was definitely a little bit ungrounded, but I think I think that was okay because um because ultimately, like, whenever I talk to people who have some sort of profound mystical experience or spiritual thing or some sort of like thing, and sometimes they get caught up in kind of like, what does it mean? And I experience myself as like Jesus Christ or something. Does that mean I'm Jesus or whatever? And to me, like, all of that is irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. What means something is what you do with it, right? What does it become the seed or the catalyst for you in your life? How do you take whatever that experience was without like over interpreting it about what it means as far as your identity or who you are, or is this okay or not okay? And how do you channel it, if that's constructive for you, valuable for you, into something like powerful and valuable in your life? And ultimately like that's how that's how I digested that experience. Like that's how I've continued to digest that experience in terms of just giving me a catalyst for who I want to become in my life and the work that I do.
Incredible. And what was then, did you take the car and you went out to New York shortly after?
Yeah, shortly after. So this was beginning of September, is end of Burning Man. I came out of that and I was literally like, my credit cards were I was getting to a point with my car that if I didn't like drive to New York soon, I would I wouldn't have money for gas to get there, right? So I had this whole experience. I had just had a major oh, I didn't mention the other thing that happened just before Burning Man is that I had a co-founder situation that totally blew up. And
Mm.
like in the messiest way possible. We had been part of an accelerator, a really awesome accelerator in San Francisco called Rock Health. And one of the things that was up for contention was that he didn't like that I was living in my car, and then I wanted to go to Burning Man. There was a lot of other stuff there as well that was just like, but it basically, that whole thing blew up. So everything was kind of blowing up, and I was being confronted by my financial situation. And then I just felt this deep calling that I had to go to New York City. Um, and so this is I love sharing this story just because sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. Um, so I decide I'm going to New York, and this happens in kind of the second half of November. And I leave New York on, I think it was November 20th or something, 2011. And on the way to New York, I called two people. One is a friend that I kind of knew through Burning Man, and I was like, "Hey, I'm moving to New York. I'm kind of trying to raise money for this project I'm working on. And do you know anyone?" She's like, "Well, come over to a Thanksgiving dinner I'm hosting." Um, and so she invites me to her Thanksgiving dinner. And then the other person I call is my future wife, Natasha, who at that time was just like a good friend of mine. And I'm like, "Hey, can I come and crash on your couch for a few weeks?" So,
14 years
and
later.
she had a boyfriend at the time, and they had a really rocky relationship. Like they were kind of on the verge of breakup. So two things. I get to New York the day before Thanksgiving, and Natasha's out of town, so I sleep in my car one last night, and I wake up on Thanksgiving Day. And on Thanksgiving Day, two things happen. So I think it was November 24th, 2011. Um, I go to this party where I meet this lady's husband, who invests $600,000 in my company at the time.
How soon
And
after? How soon after
um,
write the check?
basically I had the money like within 6 months.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I move into my future wife and business partner's house.
Incredible.
So that all happened on Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving Day is like a really special day for me, because that was a serious kind of like,
Oh yeah.
living in my car was a kind of serious. I hesitate to call it a dark night of the soul, but it was a major turning point in my life, a major event that kind of like changed the direction of my life. And that mystical experience was kind of like the pinpoint of that.
It's interesting that you identify Burning Man as a mystical experience, because Thanksgiving New York is just as much the mystical experience in the story as Burning Man was in so many ways. So it's part of the same, and it's incredible how
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It was kind of like it was a different kind of mystical experience, not quite internal in the same way, but
Sure, sure,
and
sure.
maybe it took longer to recognize for what it was as well.
Unbelievable. This is such an important point, because this is the the transformational journey that we talk about here, and that folks that go through our programs experience, is quite destructive in nature. Can be,
Mm,
usually is.
hmm.
I know it was for me. I mean, destructive, it could be on the external, but certainly on the internal, right? Identities that we've held on to, relationships that we've had, all these things, they start crumbling in some regard to make way for the new. But as the crumbling is happening, it's never clear where it's all leading and where it's all going. So it doesn't even require trust, because whether you trust or not, it's all happening. So what's interesting about these transformational journeys is that when they hit, you're just on the ride, and
Yeah.
it could be a bumpy, rocky ride for certain. And so then there was some validation there on Thanksgiving. It sounds like, okay, I see why New York, incredible. And was
Well,
this,
it wasn't like instant, because the like it wasn't like that. Like those things,
sure, 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 sure,
I met those
sure.
people, and then
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
then I had the pitch meeting, and then da 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 da. But
Right.
the in retrospect, like Thanksgiving Day, that's when both points of contact happened.
Yeah. The catalyst. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so was this for Sutra? Was Sutra with
No,
this Jeff?
that was a
Okay.
different. Yeah,
Okay.
that was for. So at that time, I was working on a platform called Heartbeat, which is like pre-spiritual experience, mystical experience. It was like a platform for fitness professionals. And post I was really, again, I think one of the questions you maybe suggested, or territories you suggested we might explore, is um, like converting. How do you convert that into like the work that you do? And when I came out of that mystical experience, I knew that I wanted to bring more love into the world. I didn't really know what that meant. And one of the territories I was really interested in was around work. And coming out of Burning Man, I was really interested in kind of like reciprocity. And so we kind of pivoted Heartbeat to be an e-commerce platform where independent creators could post their products and then could cross promote each other's products. And so we're trying to build networks of mutual support where we would track like traffic that they would send to each other and somehow like try to, help them support each other in meaningful ways. It didn't end up working out, but that was that was the kind of like the shift from inspired by that mystical experience.
Yeah. What was the assumption that you had that didn't quite pan out in the market?
Um, oh boy, that's a great question. I think in some ways I feel like I've been circling around that territory since then, really looking at, yeah, I'm really interested in the embodied expression of love and care. Like, what does that look like, particularly in the context of our economy, of how we do work? And so it's one of those things that sounds really cool in theory, like, hey, let's build a social network where people like, gift work to each other or support each other. But in practice, there's so much complexity, at least in my experience, and I haven't seen any successful implementation of it. So I'm not sure what the assumption was, as much as just our execution was not um, was not like right in that sense. And I mean, I could get more technical. We were ultimately competing with a platform like Shopify
Sure.
uh, in creating really easy storefronts. And what we found was that most of our creators wanted more sophisticated features, and we weren't as interested in building an e-commerce tool as we were in these kind of more relational things. And the relational things were not translating to meaningful traffic to the people's storefronts. And
Mm.
so in that sense, we were kind of like offering a lesser equipped online storefront that wasn't really delivering on the promise of traffic and more customers.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested. So you broke up, so to speak, with the original co-founder, who then you started saying we. Who was the we that you eventually? Who did you bring on board?
Natasha. Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
great.
exactly. So I moved in with her, and it's such a like funny story. Like, literally, we were 100% platonic. We were like, I was sleeping on her floor for like 6 months. Um yeah, I mean, I want to just share some nuances here, because I think they're so interesting about um what it takes to get out of a situation like I was in, right? Like living in my car. And in that moment, it wasn't so scary, but I think if I didn't have the support systems and access to, like, I've always had access to like, obviously, like, I'm a white guy that is, like, reasonably good looking. I present well, I'm articulate, I'm intelligent, I'm college educated. So I have a lot going for me in just a world of like kind of default privilege, right? And so I think, like, something I've really reflected on through that whole experience was, given everything that I had, um, like, I'm really present to what it took to get me out of that. Because when you're going through bankruptcy or living in your car and all these things, like, there's a whole bunch of social structures that just kind of like collapse around you. That if you're trying to rent a place, you need to have. I
Yeah.
think when I ended up renting an apartment in New York City, like, I needed to have like 14 or $20,000 cash up front, right? My
Wow.
investor was nice enough to give me the reference, to give me the money up front, all of that stuff, right? So there was a lot, like, for a while I had to get my phone through Natasha. So there was a confluence of things that
Mm.
made it possible for me to re-enter society, and as kind of like a functional citizen. And so I really reflect on that, as far as just how difficult it can be to re-enter the world once you've had one of these like destructive transformational, or just like a kind of a challenging experience like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so going back to kind of how we started working together, I had been living with Natasha. I was able to raise this money. So I literally, like, I was so low on cash, I sold my car. So I literally sold everything I sold everything that I had of value in moving to New York. And when I got to New York, I sold my car because I was that strung out and like no money. And then the investor money came in like at the last moment. Um, and that's when I was able to get an apartment and kind of like situate myself. And Natasha was transitioning out of another job. And I was like, hey, I'm going to run this awesome startup. It's going to be super successful. Why don't you come and work with me for a bit? And
Yeah.
that's when we actually, like, when I was living with her, we were both so busy, we barely spent time together. When we started working together is when we fell in love with each other.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So we weren't dating when we actually started working together. We were just good friends.
Yeah. As somebody who's started 3 different companies, I now am running the center. The partnership part and finding the right partner in terms of business partner, I know to be very vital to the success
Right.
of business almost as much as a product market fit. And so what was it about Natasha that outside of the falling in love that makes her such a good
Mm.
partner to build something with?
I think this is a really deep question that intersects with many developmental layers for me personally, and in it kind of also blurs the boundaries of business and intimate partner. I I feel like I'm one of those entrepreneurs who's fundamentally, probably less so today, but fundamentally unemployable. And I've been literally fired from every job I've had. So even like I raised $5 million for a company shortly after college, got fired by the board, 3-4 years after that. So, or I had co-founder blowouts. So there were kind of certain relational patterns that followed me around. So first and foremost, like one of the biggest parts of my transformation, which was very much supported by my relationship with Natasha, is the way that she offered me a space of unconditional love, and really allowed me to explore deep insecurities within myself in a way that I'd never been able to do. Right. So it's not that she was like the source of my transformation, but in the way that she expressed and held her love for me, and in the way that I was able to kind of mirror things and understand things about, um, I think one of the first stepping stones in a transformation for a person can be recognizing that all those things about yourself that you think are horrible or that are wrong with you, um, that they're just they are what they are, but they're not who you are, and really like discovering that and discovering how they're just different ways of being that you can work with and transform or somehow channel or integrate, is a major, major shift, right? Is from being that thing to being in relationship to that thing. Like that's the whole game of transformation, right? From being that thing to being in relationship to that thing, whatever it is. And so first and foremost, the thing that Natasha offered me as far as partnership in the deepest sense of it was a space where I could begin that journey of kind of dealing with my deepest insecurities that had often kind of translated to either very dysfunctional, destructive relationship with women or business partners or just different people in my life. And I think that created the foundation for like everything else as far as like maybe the more practical dimension of what made us good business partners was that um we were very different but complementary. Like first, a lot of people ask me about what's it like working with your like relationship partner, and I'd say it's amazing, but it's not for everyone. We literally spend 24 hours a day together, but we love it, and we continually learn and discover new things about each other. We never run out of things to talk about, and we deal well with the pressure of like, we both kind of came from like lesser means, and so we're very comfortable dealing, not comfortable, but capable of dealing with like financial pressure, like roughing it out. I think at that level, and we're both super, like I like to think we're both super intelligent. Like she went to Harvard. We're both kind of like figure it out. We're both good at the hustle side of things. Um, but in different ways. Like I'm kind of and like I'm more technical, kind of tools minded. She's more operational and kind of good at like handling all sorts of details. And so we balance each other out really, really well in terms of the things that we both like doing or that we're both good at doing.
Mm. Yeah, I believe that most of the significant traumas we experience in our life are relationship based. They happen in a relationship, and really
Mm,
the only way through them. Oftentimes, when people go on their transformational journey, they're in isolation, so they're off somewhere, they're meditating, they're doing that inner work. But eventually, you have to go back into a relationship in
mhm.
order to truly heal those core wounds. And it sounds like you had the opportunity to heal two types of sort of traumas: the business trauma with partnership, but also love and intimacy and sexuality with the same person, which is quite unique and different.
It
And
is unique and different, yeah. And I think a big, like for me at least, a big part of it was about um healing my relationship to my deepest insecurities, which were ultimately kind of part of the shadows that were expressing themselves in those in it was what I was compensating for. It was what I was not seeing about myself. Which the work of transforming that was far bigger and took much more than just the relational container with my wife. But there was something about the seed that the foundation that she provided for me that really helped me turn a corner on that journey.
yeah, yeah. What was it like, the transition from the sort of, let's call it the death of heartbeat and prior to the birth of Sutra? So
Hmm.
that, oh, this is now another thing that's not working great. How did you realize that? And
Brutal.
brutal, it is brutal. It's a part of you dying in essence. So
Yeah.
how did you both process that?
It was brutal because, like we talked about, there was this secondary mystical experience of, this kind of like, oh, like I went through the valley of death. It lived in my car and then raised money, and it was supposed to be the rainbow journey. Everything is good now. I've met my soulmate and this business
Yeah.
um and so that not working out. And then, we moved into like Natasha's mother's house, again, kind of going through this like deep, deep financial darkness. And this is kind of what I meant is that I think what one of the incredible things about our partnership, like Natasha joined the entrepreneurial journey because of me. Like she's not. I'm like, let's go build it. She's into this because she really believes in what she's doing, and because she loves me. She is not because she like really wants to do the whole like start your own business thing. That really comes from me. And so to be with someone that is willing to kind of stay with it through through the darkest of times. And I think a lot of relationships are uh, challenged or damaged by financial hardship. And so to be able to go through like this really deep, 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 I mean, we were at one point in time, to keep things going, we were literally like on food stamps. We were taking advantage of every government program we could come up with just to keep working on what is now Sutra. This is so Heartbeat was kind of went downhill around 2014 or so. And again, I had another major in the blowout with that investor. So this is a pattern that kind of like followed me around. Um, and I was really attached to the name heartbeat.com because I'd gone to a lot of trouble to get it. And part of like why he invested was he loved the domain name and he wanted to sell it. And so that was um, like a major point of contention for us. And so that relationship kind of like blew up. And so there was a real moment of just like questioning this whole world peace thing. Where are we going with this? What are we doing? And right around 2015, someone had told me about the ULAB program from the Presencing Institute, and Natasha and I both participated in that. That was their first iteration of the large scale version of that program. Um, and so there's something about that just profoundly inspired both of us in the way that it was one of the like like coming out of my mystical experience, I was looking for how can I do something online that truly cultivates genuine human connection and care. And the ULAB program was the first time where I experienced that. They had 30,000 people participating, and they broke us up into small groups. I think it was a group of 6 or 7, and we met once a week, and they gave us a particular structure for that conversation. And I experienced deep, meaningful connection and relationships with strangers that I met online. And so there was something there that was kind of like, aha, like there's something here. The way that people feel connected is through small groups. And at that time, like I studied computer engineering in college, and I graduated in 2003. But I hadn't coded since then. I literally, even though I raised money for different tech startups, I wasn't involved in coding at all. So, in 2015, we were just like so broke. Literally, I had been carrying this massive debt, the $60,000 debt, and so I declared bankruptcy. So I was like nothing, living in my wife's mother's house, like literally like fucking nothing. Um, and um, and so I was again confronted with this moment of like either let go, get a job, or figure it out. And so I taught myself how to code. So I coded the first version of what is now Sutra, something radically like less than what it is today, but really with this inspiration around being able to scale small group learning, and also like I share this story a lot because I think it's such a profoundly important insight into what it takes to transform a vision into reality, which is about like the single biggest thing I learned from my two big failures as in business, like I raised $5 million and then $600,000, right? Is just the importance of like small scale iteration versus like investing years building something to put something out that then nobody wants or doesn't land the way that you hoped it would. So in the position that I was in, I had just read Lean Startup by Eric Ries, which is an incredible book for anyone who's thinking about launching a startup. And I'd encountered Theory U, and together they really introduced me to this idea of prototyping. So I wrote the first line of code in 2015. 3 months later, we deployed it in a co-working space that we were working out of in New York City. And then we tried it with our Burning Man camp. And then there'd been an organization that Natasha was involved with, the Harvard program in refugee trauma. We started working with them. They were looking at shifting from an old, I think they were using Moodle from some old LMS they were using. And so we kind of updated what we were doing. And we were just iterating, prototyping, and hustling. Like at one point, HPRT, the Harvard program in refugee trauma, they were paying us $1,000 a month. And that was our entire income for a year. So we were making $12,000 a year, just like, food stamps, hustling, figuring it out, and iterating with nothing besides just like connection to, talking to the people we were working with and building from there.
What was driving you? I mean, this was you went through two big failures, and
Yeah.
that sane person would be like, okay, I'll go get a job. But as we know, with most successful entrepreneurs, whoever becomes eventually a successful entrepreneur, you have to have an unreasonableness to you in some regard, and sort of a lack of a sort of stubbornness, you can say. There does seem to be a bit of stubbornness. So what do you think was driving you here to be like, let's try another thing. Let's keep going.
It's one of those things. I think it's a double-sided answer. And I'll frame this in the context of a micro story. So in 2017, I was working on a Burning Man art project that was a little bit provocative, and it was something that I had that had kind of come to me like over the years. It was basically at Burning Man, you have these giant sculptures that are a word like love or believe or whatever. And so I was like, there was one moment I was just like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if you had a word and it was word? And then a little later, I was like, oh yeah. And then what if it was like covered in pages of scripture from all the world's religions? Like, in the beginning was the word, and the word was of God, and the word was God. And then, and for a long time I struggled with that. I was like, wow, that sounds really, really provocative. And then I've just kind of my relationship to the mystical as it expanded. I felt like I could deliver that project with integrity. And there was a lot of it was very provocative. Like as I was raising money for it, many people, particularly Jewish people, were just telling me like you can't burn the Torah, and it was like really offensive. And so I went on this whole thing. I just talking to people from different religions, and there was this one conversation I had with somebody, a guy named Moses. He was like, Lorenz, how much of this project is for you, and how much of this project is for God? And I was like, it's 100% for me and 100% for God. And so, but like, it was so clear to me that that was the truth. Um, and so what, what I, what I mean to say is that in the question of like what drives me, the 100% for me is that like, I just don't want to fucking fail, like to kind of, especially as I get older now, like I'm in my mid 40s. At that time I was in my mid 30s, but it's one thing to be like a kid in your 20s and you have that the startup and this like but working on anything meaningful takes so much energy. And after a while, when you just invested so much of yourself in something that you just believe in, like the prospect of like failing is, for me is just like I can't fail. Like this has to work. And then so that's the kind of like more selfish whatever, like that's the 100% for me side of it. But then there is this other which is equally strong, right? I think that's the thing to understand. It's not like, oh, it's mostly this, mostly that. It's equally just as much part of it, which is just this, even like, I have plenty of dark nights of the soul like since then. When I look at the world today and I just see what's going on and I just see the extreme polarization and suffering, and I just ask myself like what does the world need and what can I contribute? And I just land on like, what we're trying to do is cultivate relational capacities at scale. We're trying to create online spaces that invite like meaningful connection and conversation, and most importantly invite like deeper levels of awareness, invite people's capacity to be with each other, to feel each other. And I don't know how to do that, right? Like I don't know how to do that at scale, but all of Sutra has been an inquiry into how to do that,
Mm.
right? It's not that like what we're doing right now as a learning platform is delivers on that, or even if you sign up for Sutra that you would recognize that. But it's that in the background of everything that we're doing, that's the question that is always alive. That's the question is like how can this genuinely help like improve the quality of communication between people at the full spectrum of what it means to communicate, not just what people say, but the mental, emotional, embodied, and beyond capacity to really be with each other. And so when I look at the work that we're doing, the answer for me is that this is so profoundly important. I don't know how to deliver on it, um, but it is unquestionable for me that with everything we're facing today, like it's like existentially important for us as a society to learn how to be with each other in this way. Um, and so like I don't know what else I would do with my life. I think to also just add a little bit of maybe grounding to it. I often ask myself, is this the thing for me to be doing right now? Right? No matter how difficult it is, like, is this the right thing? It may be going crazy, just, I may have no idea where this is going, but I can still feel that somehow like this is the right thing for me to be doing right now. This is the right expression of my energy. And in that sense, like I feel also as attached as I am, like there's also maybe the one thing we haven't touched on so much here is just relationship to God and devotion, which I consider which isn't part of everyone's transformational process, but for me has been an enormous part of my transformational process is just direct experience of God, relationship to that, like deep devotion, kind of a deep aspiration around that. And I always like that is the foundation of everything for me, like surrender and trust to that, and kind of like praying and being receptive to that signal, to whatever that signal might be. And so as like stubborn and like kind of like just determined as I am, um, I would evaporate all of that in the face of kind of some sort of like divine intuition to the contrary.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're in relationship with God and constantly checking in. And is this what I need to be doing? Is this where I need to be? And it's fully
Right.
resident inside of you,
Yeah, exactly.
pushing you forward. So that 100% God, 100% me, res- it makes, I love that. I love that because it's true. It's so true. For somebody who doesn't know, what is Sutra?
Sutra is a social learning platform designed around meaningful connection and conversation. So that can mean a few things. If you're running cohort-based learning experiences, Sutra basically takes care of everything from like the registration page, processing payments, registering members, to setting up the online social spaces, organizing the content, stuff like that. I think some of the more interesting stuff that we've been getting into recently has involved AI and running um, asynchronous AI moderated learning experiences. So, for example, in the context of say like a self-paced course, you have a self-paced course, people sign up, they go through it on their own pace, kind of like a digital book. Like I think the statistics for that are that 97% of people don't complete those. So the attrition rate is extremely high, and there's no social dimension. There's no like you're just kind of on your own. One of the things, I think one of the most unique and powerful things that we're doing that we're really expanding on is how in a self-paced learning experience, AI can function like an asynchronous facilitator. So everyone who's participating in a self-paced experience kind of has an opportunity to learn from each other, to see each other, to connect. And then AI highlights the best contributions. It finds connections between what people share. It suggests connections between people. So it's an entirely self-paced experience that is also social at the same time, with AI basically performing the function of an intelligent facilitator. Like, you know, if you have a cohort-based experience and you have an amazing facilitator that's kind of like highlighting what people share and finding connections, that delivered by AI in a self-paced experience is a big part of what we've been expanding on, and something I'm really excited about.
Yeah. One of the features I like most is kind of how people know the pay to play model, but here it's participate to play. So the idea of if you want the next module or you want the next video,
Right, right,
comment, right, to participate in the discussion in some sort of way.
right.
I
Yeah,
think,
you have to basically, if you want to move through the content, you have to post, and then there's an
yeah,
AI engine that filters the best contributions. So I like for me, this all like revolves around this territory of like collective intelligence. How do you surface the insight and understanding of participants? How do you because in our relationship to content, to information, I feel like there's the information itself, and then there's this secondary dimension of our way of being in relationship to it, how we make meaning of it, how our relationship to the other people that are in relationship to that content. And in online learning, that secondary dimension is almost completely overlooked, right? It's just about the content. It's just about the information. And that secondary dimension to me is the most powerful in terms of the developmental value that it offers. And that's where I feel AI has this really unique and powerful capability to offer value around the sense making, the way that the intelligence of all the people in the system, in the group, in the course can be surfaced, and the way that connections can be made between people in a learning experience in a way that really adds value to everyone.
yeah, using technology to connect people rather than how it's used often to disconnect people in so
Yeah, I
many
mean, our like
types
many of
of
our
work.
social platforms are just they're just yeah, very polarizing.
Very polarizing. What are some of the sort of surprising experiences that you've seen folks have within Sutra, that sort of unexpected
Mm.
experiences, perhaps, that have pleasantly surprised you?
Um, Certainly some of the most meaningful conversations I've been part of in terms of people really being vulnerable and opening up and sharing deeply about themselves have been in the context of some of the programs that we're running on Sutra, which is something I'm um, we're very actively iterating on to understand how to expand on that. Like one of the challenges I've experienced on other social platforms right now is that I'm just seeing there's so much AI generated content, which in some ways is cool and all, but it also kind of, you can just feel it in the quality of the words. It's
Yeah.
all kind of hook driven. It's designed to get your attention in 2 sentences, and there's a certain structure and a formula to it. And I'm just like, oh, it's exhausting. After a while, it sounds kind of intelligent, but after a while, it's
Oh, yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, I like creating a space for deeper, more authentic human sharing. And I think, I guess I'm surprised to see how that comes through in this particular format, and also how hard it is to really expand on it. Like I'd say one of the biggest challenges that we're dealing with right now is, um, like we ran a course with Leon, the I think it was called Anatomy of a Safe Space,
That's right.
and so people contribute, but then the question is really, what do you do with that? Even if you have a system of people where everyone's contributed something thoughtful, how can that kind of have a life beyond that experience as some sort of knowledge document or living library of understanding that transcends that experience? And that's something we've been, like, not theoretically but very practically, like with many different experiences, prototyping and experimenting with. And yeah, and the answer has been a little bit elusive. Like even if people contribute super deep, thoughtful responses, what do you do with that? And that's something that um, we're trying to expand on.
Yeah, I mean, it's no small challenge, and this is the beauty, but the difficulty as well of this kind of enterprise of trying to innovate is that you don't really know where the answer is. You have to just kind of keep going and keep discovering, keep iterating, and hope you find the answer as you go. But be driven by the question and constantly be
Yeah,
searching for it. But it's hugely ambitious what you all are aiming for, and I think, like you said, it is as needed as ever in this world that we're in and that we're moving further into to have spaces, because the thing is, maybe we'll move to a world where people start moving to physical locations where their tribe is, but we currently live in a world where folks are in a certain geographical location and their tribe are elsewhere, and that's also the beauty of technology, is that we can do that. And so how do you s- connect with those that are in your quote unquote tribe and live elsewhere, but in a really deep and meaningful way, like you might around a dinner table,
yeah,
and
for sure.
ideas asynchronously. Yeah, it's really fascinating and great work that you're
Yeah.
doing, man.
I was just in LA and had my first experience of a self-driving car.
Oh yeah.
And I
Oh,
think that self-driving cars for sure are going to exacerbate that trend of people living
yeah.
farther away, of people, there's something really nice to kind of like live where you want and not have to suffer a 2 hour commute or whatever, but just have a self-driving car. So I think for sure between Zoom and AI and self-driving cars, we're seeing a world of more and more geographic distribution.
Yeah, totally, totally. What have you learned about human connection since you started Sutra?
Oh, that's a deep question. Um, I think the thing that comes to mind is revolves around attunement and really recognizing the full spectrum of what communication means between two people. In that it's not just about what's spoken, and that there's so much more that is unspoken but communicated anyway, is that can be received with full awareness, but often isn't, and the capacity to really feel another person, right? That I feel you feeling me, to really be with another person in that way. I think that when I started on this journey in 2011, um, that understanding, that vocabulary was not present for me, right? I didn't really have a lot of the language um, for some of these things that I understand in a more um, embodied and direct way. And so when it comes to human connection, um, for me, the heart of that revolves around safety, or which means that I'm with a person that I feel them feeling me, and that we're able to communicate across a much broader spectrum than what is just spoken. And I think this is very much like a developmental thing as well, in the sense of I'm really present to when I meet someone, um, where they're at in that capacity. That often I'll meet people, and they're not tuned and kind of like attuned in that way, which is cool because I can meet them where they're at. But there is something that um, that can open up as a capacity to really be with another person, which also um, is the foundation of the ability to be with disconnect, to be with difference, right? Is that you can have a point of view that is profoundly different from mine, and if I can hold space for you and feel you and fully receive what you're sharing, that allows the energy of that communication to
Mm.
somehow move in a more constructive way, which is, I think, one of the things that is most missing in our world right now. We live in this extreme positionality, with zero or very little capacity to really receive the other in a way that the other feels like they've been received. And that in any kind of positional situation, like that's the only thing that will shift it. Well, I mean, maybe there are others, but that, really feeling like, okay, you really have understood what I'm saying. Now we can explore the other side of the conversation, right? Or you're really present to everything I've shared. Um,
Mm.
to me, that's a profound ingredient for human connection.
Yeah. I just had this vision of you. And have you seen these YouTube videos of kind of like one carnivore versus 20 vegans? And it's sort of, they're kind of like in this argumentative space, or one capitalist versus 20 communists, and they're going viral. So
No, but
quite interesting. It's quite, so like
mm,
one person in one extreme position is going
mm,
up
mm,
against 20 people who have the opposite point of view.
mm.
And
And
it,
what happens?
well, you start to hear the points of view. It gets, it's a little short snippets at
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
Time to
No,
time.
you have to send that to me. I have no idea.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. But it would be fascinating for Sutra to host, in a sense, to create a space where there is one position, and through a series of conversations, folks are able to share their points of view, and you kind of have this opportunity, kind of like an idea marketplace, where the consumer and whoever's interacting with it can really be influenced in the proper way of being influenced. Like, hey, this is
Mm,
actually a point of view that has some ground to it. Okay, I can see that point of view, but this is how I see this. And
right,
it's a
right.
really interesting place. Not saying you have to do this, but it just came to mind of, wow,
Mm,
that would heal so much in our society,
mm,
being able
mm,
to actually listen to, receive opposite points of view, and engage with them as well,
right.
to stress
And
test your own.
I think it's such a big thing, and honestly, something that I've been thinking about a lot in the context of some sort of live gathering. Like I've really wanted to put together some kind of music festival specifically designed around holding space for divergent points of view. That you have people who share something that is so uh, provocative to you, but somehow in the way that the space is held and the guidelines provided in the structure, that you're able to really receive that and practice with it, because it's hard. I mean, it's so
Hard.
hard. It's so
Yes.
hard. As much as I'm talking about this stuff, it's not like I don't get in arguments with people or have a hard time with certain people in my life. Um, but but I really try to practice kind of holding space for difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a wonderful exercise to engage in, and I hope more people do. It's not easy.
So
What are you
hard.
most so hard, it's so hard. What are you most looking forward to with Sutra?
um, what am I most looking forward to with Sutra? Um, I'm really excited about the possibility of AI, and I'm most looking forward to. I mean, to be honest, I'm most looking forward to cracking um, this question of collective intelligence, of really being able to deliver a group experience where the participants are have a palpable direct experience of the group field, in a way that is asynchronous and kind of in some ways on demand, that it doesn't, obviously you can go to a fancy retreat in Mexico and have this like, deep embodied like transformational experience. But bringing this experience of collective intelligence into more common contexts like an organization or a group learning experience or a community in a way that is palpable and recognizable and offers some sort of tangible value, is a really a big part of what I'm looking forward to figuring out on Sutra, with Sutra.
Great. Incredible. So as we begin wrapping up this episode, if you can leave the listeners with an insight, a tool, some thoughts on their own transformational journey, something to sit with, whatever it is, what might that be?
How about a poem?
That'd be beautiful.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Awesome. This is totally not planned, but I do have a printout of my favorite poem right here, which
Beautiful.
I've been meaning to frame. And this poem, it really speaks to many of the themes that we've been talking about in terms of, I think, the deeper dimensions of transformation and what it means to be in relationship with not knowing, which is kind of an undercurrent to you were talking about earlier, right? It's just you like, how do you deal with the kind of the wisdom of not knowing and operating from that in a world that demands you to know. So this is you may have heard of it. It's a poem from St. John of the Cross.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it'll take me 60 seconds to read. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Awesome. To reach satisfaction in all, desire its possession in nothing. To come to the knowledge of all, desire the knowledge of nothing. To come to possess all, desire to possess nothing. To arrive at being all, desire to be nothing. To come to the pleasure you have not, you must go by a way in which you enjoy not. To come to the knowledge you have not, you must go by a way in which you know not. To come to the possession you have not, you must go by a way in which you possess not. To come to be what you are not, you must go by a way in which you are not. When you turn toward something, you cease to cast yourself upon the all. For to go from the all to the all, you must leave yourself in all. And when you come to the possession of all, you must possess it without wanting anything. In this nakedness, the spirit finds its rest, for when it desires nothing, nothing raises it up, and nothing weighs it down, because it is in the center of its humility.
Cannot think of a better ending to this episode. Lorenz, I have so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. You are somebody who has walked the walk. You're somebody who has experienced some of the lowest lows that one can experience in different regards. And your life is a testament to the human spirit, and being a conduit to life itself and to God. And I appreciate you and for all the work that you're doing out in the world. It's really a gift. Your life is a gift, and I am on your team, and I am rooting for you deeply, and Sutra's mission deeply. And I hope folks that are listening to this go out and check out Sutra, because it is an incredible platform. I have played around with it, and I do think so many in our community can benefit from it. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the kind words. And I'm really honored to be in this conversation, and grateful that you've invited me, and I'm grateful to be able to share this story, and really enjoyed everything we've covered. So much love to you, and much love to your audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. To learn more about today's guest, visit our podcast landing page at www.podcast.centerfortransformationalcoaching.com. You'll find links to their website, social media, and anything else they might want to share there. And if you're curious to explore more about our work, our trainings, or the deep coaching approach, you'll find everything at www.centerfortransformationalcoaching.com. A new episode of this podcast releases every 2 weeks, so please subscribe wherever you listen to stay up to date on each episode. Until next time, stay present, embrace love, and continue sensing into what life is calling you toward. See you soon.